Activision Blizzard Esports. So across ABE, we share leadership, but at the individual franchise levels, they're structured very, very differently.
Awesome. Rob, what's a Misfits Gaming event look like?
So we'll start in our local markets, Mutineers and Mayhem. Start with the smaller sides, our watch parties, community supported events. We've run out of last year. Let's start with Buffalo Wild Wings. We did a small partnership where we'd go and set up watch parties for the community, bring in merchandise from the league that we could give out and activate at. We had all their bar taken over, and we gained a lot of support for our matches, building our fan base like that. For the Mutineers, we just did a kickoff called In the Know Bowl for the new season, and it was down in Miami during the Super Bowl. We took over a space, and we had NFL players play with our pros in a tournament bracket format that fans could attend as well. So building that core community for us is really the most important. For other watch parties, we partnered with Topgolf this year. So we're doing Topgolf run events in Miami, Tampa, and Orlando that you can come out to for the Mayhem. And there's free Topgolf, there's a special menu, there's live matches. We'll play usually the match before just to get people situated so you can get your drinks and food. And then we have merchandise on site as well if people want to support and be a part of our new Vice theme that we have this year. So I know that color change was really fun for the community. As far as Misfits, we have the LEC team over in Berlin playing in the European League. So we actually have the Alienware and Misfits arena there in Berlin that runs gaming tournaments, and they do watch parties as well. We have some of our professional players stream from there as well. So a lot of events coming in 2020 to build up our community and support the fans that support us.
You mentioned having NFL players as part of that Super Bowl. How's that process work? Like, how do you get those players to even come play?
Right. So the relationships that we have with our partners, some of the people in our organization already have those relationships built in. It's a network. It's one of the important things about networking is that there's so many people that are connected in our org that they reach beyond gaming. They reach into the business space, into the marketing space, into the sports world as well. So, yeah.
Alex, what's GCX look like?
A number of things. So at the baseline, we operate off of really like a connected community. So at the heart of our event is raising money for St. Jude, and we're lucky in that. So what we do is we start from there, and we say, okay, so from there we have this huge community of gamers, internationally that come to see us. So how do we plug, those people and their individual interests, like outside of gaming or around gaming, into this event? So now let's bring, we would invite Misfits to come and give them a platform at the event to sell merch or run a watch party or, interact with influencers or, stage an exhibition like a Pros versus Joes or something like that, and really provide them a community-driven platform so that they can grow and interface with our community and we can interface with theirs. And that's just like at a show floor level. Then from a programming and entertainment level, we are able to organize any competitive event, large or small. It can be anything from an invitational that spins up, months ahead of the event. It can be something that is in, at the show, on the show floor. Day one, you show up, you compete. Day two, you compete again at the end of day two than you are in the finals on main stage. And we've done that with, Apex Legends in the past. We've done that with Sea of Thieves. We're big in the speedrunning community, so we're starting to get a lot of those competitions. And so again, we're able to really cover both, and the strategy is kind of just driven to plugging everybody into a single objective and then allowing them to use that objective as a platform to grow and support both, the objective of raising money for St. Jude and for the community, but also showcasing what makes them special and how they are able to drive that support.
How far in advance do you start planning the event?
The day after the
Yeah,
event is
previous.
over.
And what's your specific role? Like, what's your day-to-day look like?
A number of things. I space it out. A lot of it's interacting with other vendors and sponsors for the event, helping them kind of like custom fit, what would you like to do on the show floor? What would you like to do from a programming perspective? Is there anything that you'd like to do at night? Because our event, for the most part, like we have an arcade that runs competitions and things 24/7. We have night programming. We do a roast every year on the night of day one. Really, I start working with vendors and sponsors, helping them build those activations. Then I will go to like a more structural perspective, and I'll work with the hotel to make sure that hotel rooms and things are going, and make sure that all of the vendors and stuff are getting those hotel rooms and getting everything in, and then working on like finalizing and placing the floor plan, getting everybody where they're supposed to be, communicating all the needs to the vendors, like our artists and retail guys, right? Then from a programming perspective, our production coordinator is actually a Full Sail grad. We'll work with him, make sure that everything that he needs for the stage is done. My boss, Kevin, is very much a massive showman, so he'll be helping shape like what the shape of that programming is and what that schedule looks like and how we're going to bring it and effectively present it to the audience. So I kind of like weave through all of that and keep it connected and keep it running on the day-to-day.
Awesome. Erin, what's your day-to-day look like on an event?
Well, I was gonna jump in and say that it sounds like you do a little of everything, which is exactly what I do. Right. So it could be either writing up statements of work for contracts. It could be going through our budgets and making sure we are still on track. It could be ordering Costco orders for Crafty for the group. I've gotten very good at figuring out what cheese log combinations work well for the crew.
It's a skill.
It's a skill. Right. Yeah, who can't leave their cameras, so they just need snacks and stuff to eat. So it could be working with our publishing group and understanding what the next social campaign that's coming out. I terrifyingly ran the social media for our last Master Store. It was the scariest job I've ever done. So you're always learning new skills, and I think kind of when it boils down to it is adaptability and being willing to pitch in on anything is really the most important thing that you could be doing on an esports team. Because we do have structured roles, but sometimes that person, it gets sick, or that person is in the bathroom and they need to go and run and grab a player from their practice area. So you really learn to kind of pitch in any language, in any kind of capacity. I always joke that, if we need to sweep the floors and change out the trash, you know who to call. So you really kind of learn to wear a lot of hats.
It's really important because a lot of everything that we do, like though everybody, like you said, has like a very specific role and there are very specific things that need to be done, all of it is so deeply connected to one another. Like none of them is disconnected from the process, and they all kind of very much rely on each other to move forward. So you kind of have to be able to adapt.
So the lesson there is to learn every aspect of an event to pitch in, or specialize.
I wouldn't even necessarily, and maybe you guys would disagree, but I think that so the way that we approach that is we actually do a lot of cross training on our team. So, let's say you're interested in the broadcast side of things, you can go cross train with the broadcast team and sit in the control room for the next event. Maybe you're a PA for the stage manager, something like that. So that kind of helps with redundancy. But, for example, I don't know how to operate a camera. I don't get that we don't do that many different hats in this particular team.
But you understand what that camera operator
absolutely
has to do.
Yes, absolutely, and what their limitations are, and what their rotations are, and what the overtime laws are, and what union laws are. So we need to definitely be aware. But I think that there's a lot of organic learning that happens in esports. You just kind of find yourself doing it. So
if someone's not doing it at the time, you find your way to do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or be like, hey man, I see you're doing something kind of cool over here. Can you teach me how this board operates? Or like, what are you kind of doing over here with the graphics package? I'd love to learn more about that. So you kind of just organically find yourself learning things.
Yeah.
People are doing, sorry.
It's very much like all about willingness, right? And visibility. Like there's something to be said for standardizing like a general structure of how everything gets done. So like you at least know what the workflow looks like, right? And then being aware and willing of kind of being like, I know generally what you do. So like, if you have to go to the bathroom, I can kind of fill in your space, right? So I can be a body.
I think it really just it's how does their role impact the larger meta of what you're doing, right? If they're not there, what happens? And that helps a lot with risk planning and capacity planning and team planning, and everything is that interconnectedness. It means that you need to understand why this role is important and what happens if it fails.
So to touch on like the org side, a lot of different projects touch so many teams at once that you kind of pick up on what other people are doing, working on. You understand their workflow, how to communicate to them properly, but you can also say, hey, that's really cool. I like what you're working on. Like, can you show me that? And everyone's, so open to learning that most people just jump in and will start explaining it to you, and you just kind of pick up from there.
And part of this comes from, you had mentioned the Wild Wild West. I mean, every year and every event, I got to believe, is different because the industry's developing at such a pace that you've got to be flexible and nimble.
Yeah,
in that.
this year we're doing, to mention the events we were doing before on what scale, on the larger end, this year we're doing in-market events. We're doing homestands and home series for Call of Duty and for Overwatch. So we'll be in Miami and we'll be in Orlando, and that's a completely new experience on that scale in major venues, one of them being here at Full Sail.
And let me tell you from the others. So it's funny because we're like on two sides of the coin. He's from the sort of franchise, or I'm from the franchise side, and you're from the team side. And that was a big jump. That homestand model was it, and continues to be a major challenge. I think both for local teams and for our central HQ team. It's not only are we doing, we took what was a weekly broadcast in a fixed location with teams in that city. Now we're introducing travel. We're introducing all of the the local activations, all of the local branding. You guys are responsible for most of what happens at the homestand. Blizzard kind of just provides guidance and resources, and we have a studio back to tie everything together. But for the most part, you guys are running the show.
We're putting it on. Yes.
Can you just, for those who don't know, describe what a homestand is?
A homestand is, if you take it back to, if you compare it to a traditional sport, it's home and away games, just on a larger scale. Instead of one away team coming in playing one match that takes 2 hours, basketball game or a football game, this is a weekend event. So it's more of an overall weekend experience. It's not so much a sporting event. It's an e-sporting event. It's entertainment. There's 6 teams coming in at once, 8 teams coming in at once, playing in Call of Duty League. It'll be a bracket format, tournament format now. In the Overwatch League, it is regular season games that will build up to a season playoffs and finals. So we're facilitating that the whole weekend. It's activations with sponsors, it's broadcasts, and running a complete show front end.
And what that translates to is teams are now traveling to different cities around the world. It's a global program in Overwatch's case. So we have teams in China, we have teams in South Korea. And with the coronavirus epidemic, it's had a major impact on the program. So, you're now introducing all of these new logistics that you previously didn't have. And that just, it complicates things on a massive scale.
Sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of coronavirus, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, that brings up the question about risk and preparing for risk. And obviously, we didn't see that coming, and every day it keeps changing. But there are other things that you're dealing with, whether it's contractually or just from a planning standpoint. How do you all deal with risk, and what are things you look at? And would coronavirus or an epidemic or pandemic like that be planned for even going in a year out?
So events by nature, you kind of understand that you reach a point where you kick the boulder over the hill and then it just becomes an avalanche, and you just kind of got to figure out how to do it as it goes. But there's definitely a lot of adaptability, because with any event, there's a whole lot of pre-planning, and something like this can very easily offset all of that. Like Rob mentioned merch and what that looks like. Merch is a whole completely different animal. But you're looking at South by Southwest, and all these companies that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on merch are now just going to sit on that merch because South by Southwest just doesn't exist anymore. Companies are struggling to figure out what they're going to do with that. So you have to plan for a lot of those eventualities. Luckily, for our event, we have a lot of a digital presence, so it's really, really easy for us to pivot. Same thing like merch can pivot digitally, things like that. So there's a lot of adaptability there, but there's definitely, having to keep in mind when you're planning and when you're building something, making sure that it's a multifaceted plan so that if something happens, God forbid that it does, that you have the ability to kind of like make sure that you direct that appropriately in an efficient way.
Where you can stretch. Where you can kind of move things around. And I like your comment about digital stuff because I think that really makes a big difference. We also do a lot of like evergreen kind of merch and things that are not necessarily specifically tied to a certain date. Once you put a date on it, if that date is not the date anymore, you got to throw it all away. So we try to stay, a little bit ahead of that stuff by, going digital or having evergreen stuff that we use. And like you mentioned during the pre-planning phases, and pre-planning could be as early as the day after the event, or it could be still, 3 days leading up to the event. There's a lot that you can do to just, create redundancies in your planning. So that's why I mentioned cross-training. If we have somebody who does get sick, we have somebody who knows how to come in and fill that gap. So a lot of it is just like kind of being that that doomsayer, that, oh man, what if this happened? Oh, well, I guess we should probably plan for that, huh?
There's got to be one on every team.
Yeah, that's right. That's me.
The biggest thing, and I think this kind of like blankets everything, like when you're leading an event or leading a team for an event, you are responsible for not only the well-being of the organization that you're representing, but the well-being of your sponsors and partners, the well-being of your attendees, be that financial well-being, physical well-being, whatever the case may be. So allowing for there to be as much flexibility and comfort within that model to make sure that everybody's taken care of, comfort, and reassured that should anything happen, you can plan for that. Like, obviously you hope to plan for every eventuality, but you can't. But starting from a place of like, is this a good decision for everybody involved, and is this something that we can all be comfortable with, is a really important and very simple way to start.
Sure.
And advocating for those partners. Like, a lot of times they're not in the room, and you have to be the one that's advocating for their needs and the things that are going to be important to them. So you can't just kind of squash all over everybody else that's not in the room just because they weren't there when the decision was made. So.
Right. So that, like we were talking earlier, that's that team and helping other people, whatever. So talking about planning, every event's has to have objectives. So let's talk through that and how you deem success. Rob, let's start with you. When you start to plan an event or a homestand, or something new, what are those objectives you're looking for? And then from that, how do you gauge success?
Yeah. First of all, for us, it's fan engagement. It's fan experience. We want our fans to feel like they got value out of our experience. We want to put on a good show. We want to make sure that they walk away telling other people about it. These games have been around for a long time. Call of Duty's been under your Christmas tree for probably 10, 12, 15 years. So everyone knows the brand. It's just building that community within Florida and having people rally around it and wanting to support it. That kind of success for us is looking towards the future. It's a plan that's 5+ years, 10 years out.
How do you measure that? The fan engagement and experience and
social media followings are helpful. Feedback through social media, people gauging how good of a time they had and giving us that kind of feedback. People signing up for email lists or showing up to watch parties after big events. All those things really help. I mean, fan art is really, I think, important in a lot of communities. That you see that kind of passion for what you're doing in your brand, and people showing that back to you kind of shows you're on the right path.
From a team standpoint, what are your revenue sources? How do you measure? Where's the revenue coming from?
It's sponsorships. Sponsorships are big. There's merchandise, sponsorships, investments. Those are the main sources. It's aligning our brand with people that want to be in esports, and there's a lot of people right now that want to be in esports and are calling and asking us, how do we do it? What's a good way in? What sort of activations can we do to reach fans, and that's where we usually start. Yeah.
Alex, what are the objectives and success measures you're looking at?
So realistically, in the gaming space, there's kind of like the high five, right? Or high, however many, I'd say 5 because it just made sense. But, like social media engagement, feedback, purchases, click-through rate, like, you can name all of that stuff. But realistically, like, you lock it down to a physical event, your real, at the end of the day, like, no-nonsense success is when you see your attendance and your proposed attendance for the next year. Like, these are my ticket pre-purchases in comparison to the last year. That's how you know you've done a good event, is when people are coming back again, right? For us, we have, like, our event is also broadcast, so we're worrying about digital engagement, viewers in the Twitch chat, people asking questions on Twitter, people actively engaging with the content that we're producing, while also making sure that the show is multifaceted, because, like, a show that you put on Twitch is not always going to be the same and really won't necessarily work the same way on a main stage as it would in a studio for a closed audience. So making sure that our shows and our performers and our activations are well established. Kevin that works with us is beyond an expert at helping our partners do that very, very well to position what they'd be producing in person on Twitch, but having to make sure that it's dually faceted, that the engagement's there. We love to see people that we know that are in the audience that are actively participating digitally. I love to see my vendors, all of my retail vendors, come out and be like, I sold out of product on day 1, so now I have to do something about that, question mark? So that's really, really nice. A lot of it, you can look at the financials, right? Is everybody selling out? Are you selling a bunch of merch? Are you running out of products? You can look at it socially. Are people actively engaging? Where's my hashtag at? What's my click-through rate on the links that I need? From a Twitch perspective, like how many viewers do we have? What's our viewed hours after, day 1?
And obviously, from a charity standpoint, what you're giving to St. Jude's, measure of success.
So, realistically, any money given to charity, specifically in the case of St. Jude, little kids who've done absolutely nothing with the most rare and aggressive forms of cancer, like, any money to them is a success. But obviously really challenging ourselves to find new and unique ways to not only plug into the community that we have, but expand that community and find new donors and plug them into the message that St. Jude is having is always a good measure of growth, more so than success. Because we don't necessarily want to call growth success, but it is a form of success.
Sure, and those relationships that build beyond your event are obviously what you're driving as well.
Absolutely.
Continued support for St. Jude.
Yeah, and like Rob said, he's getting people being like, we're not an endemic organization. I'm Samsung Refrigerators. How do I refrigerator at video gamers? Do I put video games on the screen? Like, no, you have a lot of influencers that are buying houses. Like, this is really, really, like, using what we are doing by performing to actively educate and illustrate what you can do with the demographic that's so difficult to reach in a way that is organic and appropriate is really, really important.
Well, and now every brand's trying to get into esports because of that demographic, whether it's State Farm or Ford or, ones that you just wouldn't associate.
And luckily we have all of the points of entry in spades, wink.
I wouldn't be opposed to video games on refrigerators. Just any game would be great.
Obviously, Blizzard's objective is to sell games, but is that the first determinant and from an objective standpoint, as well as getting involved in an event or a team?
Yeah, so yeah, it is different between each of the franchises. For the ones that I work on, because we are directly embedded in extensions of the game franchises themselves, the things that we really look at are, are we driving people back to the game? What is the sentiment around the game? Are people purchasing packs? Are they, engaging somehow with the game in a way that they were not before prior to watching our esports? So that comes with a lot of challenges. Data, and I think you guys will find this very true as well. Data is not always easy to come by on all of these different things. Who your viewership is, what other things they like. Sometimes you have to pay a lot of money to different agencies to give you that insight. And so a lot of it is just researching and understanding your audience. Creating that organic experience for them. We also have our competitive programs that we also look at the health of. So how many people are actually engaging in esports overall in our grassroots system? How many third-party licenses are we giving out every year? How many people are participating in that? How much prize pool goes out every year? And then we also have participation numbers. So of the people who have participated in grassroots, who have qualified into the next level, how many people are showing up? How many people are walking away, feeling like they had a good time. That's kind of the easy way to say it, but I like to say the true measure of success of an event is when you have a player that comes up to you and says, "Thank you so much for putting this on. I had a great time. This was a great tournament, and I can't wait for the next one."
Right.
And
so
that's what we love.
So it is somewhat anecdotal.
Yeah.
You look at the data, but it's anecdotal.
I mean,
when
we
you hear
have
those stories as well.
Yes, we have a whole slew of KPIs that we look at. It's obviously very important to our business. But yeah, I mean, like I said, at the end of the day, the reason why I think we're all doing this, and the reason why we love esports so much is because we love our communities. We love the players. We love the viewers. And so we just want to do a cool thing for them. So we do.
And to that point, like the reason that obviously there's a traditional mindset of having to, keep those more concrete KPIs in mind, but the community is so central to everything that happens in gaming that, sometimes, in fact, a lot more times than one would think, like data can not necessarily lie, but illustrate something that's not necessarily true. Twitch viewership, like, just because someone's watching you doesn't mean they're not also watching 3 other things. So keeping that in mind and not necessarily using data as like your tried and true only guide for what it is that you do, and using community as kind of like effective context to that. And as you feed your community, they will provide better, more accurate, more active and organic context to the data that you're collecting from them.
Yeah, we call it data-informed decision-making, not data-driven decision-making.
Interesting, that's good. All right, I'm gonna ask you guys another question, but while I'm doing that, think about some questions you all have, and we'll take questions from you all in a little bit. So I have a feeling most of these students are gonna be looking for a job soon, just a hunch. So talk about some of the entry-level positions in each of your areas that they might be looking at, and what skill sets those have.
Yeah, so at our team, we have a bunch of different layers. So first of all, we have a group called TESPA, and I think Armada is part of TESPA, which is awesome. So whoop, whoop, whoop. So TESPA is an awesome way to get involved. A lot of Armada people are already doing it. You are team managers. You are, playing on the teams. You are organizing, community events. You're putting on your own tournaments. That is fantastic experience. Coming in, already having done some events is really amazing. We love to see that. And TESPA hires directly out of their communities also. So, we have a lot of people who work within Blizzard on the TESPA team who directly came out of their home team. Like they started their esports program at their college, and then we hired them after school. So that's a really great route. The other things that you can do, at least on like live stuff, production assistance is also great. I think this is kind of similar for TV and movies as well, but that's always a great one. And that's really just essentially being a gopher. You're just running around doing whatever's needed. And then,
But it's a great way to be seen and to learn and see what you might really be interested in.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because you get to touch a little of everything. And you do get to kind of be an assistant to some of these, either the director or the producer, the TD, the audio group, stage managers. You get exposure to all of those roles. And then, there are other things that we use. We have observers for our games, so we need somebody to navigate the camera that flies around and that is not attached to a single player. We have, like graphics operations positions. We have player manager positions. At BlizzCon every year, we have esports from all the franchises at BlizzCon, and we have an enormous army of player managers who have to make sure that players are going from the hotel, getting through the mobs in front of BlizzCon, getting into the building, getting to their player practice area. Now they have to go to the bathroom and escorting them around, and so they are kind of attached to the teams, attached to the players, making sure they are where they need to be. So those kinds of roles are super fantastic to just kind of get your feet wet on that. And a lot of times we hire contract, so it's actually just something, if we have a buddy who lives in the area and it's like, hey, I know this guy is available this weekend, do you want to see if he can come and do some observing for us? So
Awesome. What about from the team standpoint? What are ways in?
Yeah, the organizations are expanding pretty rapidly right now. There's a lot of positions that come up throughout the year, and there's already some coming up this year. There's an article out that had about 20, 30 jobs that we're looking to fill sometime this year, probably towards the end of the year, but they are coming. At our events, homestands, we have a lot of volunteering opportunities. So, I mean, it's a great way to at least to get in there, to be part of the event, see how it runs, help run it yourself, connect with the people right there on site that are also running the event, that are part of the staff, and put your face in front of someone. Really just making that person-to-person connection can sometimes be like a real difference maker when the resume comes across your desk or something like that. Showing up at watch parties, another way to just kind of meet people casually, just to maybe not pitch, I want this job, but it's a good way to get to know people in that community. And we have a support group called the Chaos Crew. If you're ever looking for things that they do and ways that we activate, that's a great way to keep up on it, besides just Florida Mayhem.
What's the best way for them to find out about volunteer opportunities and events? Website?
The Chaos Crew actually puts out all of our volunteer opportunities. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right.
On
Alex?
Twitter.
And Twitter.
On Twitter. That helps.
So couple points. One, LinkedIn is the most underutilized tool in the universe, specifically in the 18 to 30-year-old age bracket. LinkedIn is very important. It's a really easy place to have like a very visual summary of your skill sets, and it's a really, really easy way for professionals that are looking for people to casually connect with you and watch what you do and then pick you for jobs. The games industry is incredibly social. It's also incredibly insular, which both works in its favor and almost sometimes to its detriment. But it's very much like there's this huge aspect of like who you know, but more so how you know them, and how you know them is impacted by the work that you do, and your work kind of becomes your calling card. Work within the games industry is really, 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 really visual. Communication skills are paramount. You need to be able to talk to people. You need to be able to communicate with people. You need to be able to hear their needs so that you can effectively meet those needs, both, in your personal position and when looking for other positions. And that really goes for anything professional. I think just about everything that Full Sail does is in heavy need in the games industry, from, anything on the production side, anything in the business side, anything in the marketing side, anything in the design side. Like, it's all very needed. All of those skill sets are very relevant to just about anything that you do, because like we were talking about earlier, you end up wearing a lot of hats, and if you're not necessarily wearing a hat, you help someone by holding their hat for them until they get back. So definitely keep that in mind. Always be willing to listen, always be willing to lend a hand. Always be on the lookout. You never know, who you meet early in their career who ends up fast tracking because they become a subject matter expert. And then next thing you know somebody who's an executive somewhere. That's probably the biggest thing.
Awesome. Before we go to go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, a lot of jobs are actually not posted online. Most of them are like, a lot of jobs in esports are like, hey, do you know a dude that knows how to do this thing? Or like, hey, we need a photographer this weekend. You know anybody? Oh, I don't know. I got like a wedding photographer friend. It's like, okay, if I actually knew friends who actually had experience in esports photography, like they would get that job immediately. But sometimes you got to end up with like, you know, somebody's buddy. So, you know, getting networking and talking to people and having, you know, a presence. Esports Twitter is a wild place. It is a wild place, but I highly recommend peeling off the layers and like starting to get into there, because there's a lot of like wacky drama, but there's also a lot of jobs being posted organically by people like me. I was looking for an associate content manager for my Hearthstone team like a couple weeks ago. Posted up on Twitter, got a bunch of responses, hired a nice person. So you just never know where you're going to see them, but get into esports Twitter. It's a weird place.
I'll save my next question. Anybody have questions for our panel? Right here, we got a mic coming for you.
Hello, my name is Uriah. At a grassroots level for events, how do you go about securing vendors and getting sponsors so that we can generate some funding for the events, since it's kind of hard to go about planning for that sort of thing?
Yeah. So we do have some contacts that maybe we haven't used in the past, that maybe we can reach out for if they're on maybe a smaller scale. If it's something like, I know in Orlando there's a lot of like fighting game community. We might be talking about that, I'm not sure. You can go to places around that also that run stuff like that. I know one down the street, Digital Battlegrounds, they do a lot of tournament structure for their LAN center. Felipe over there is a really good guy to talk to. He might have some more connections. Outside of that, I'm not, yeah. Do you have anything?
Let me put my sales hat on real quick. Like, realistically, most gaming events can connect to just about any business and just about any group, especially locally if you're trying to build local initiatives. So really just being very earnest and genuine and reaching out to anybody that comes up, you know, taking opportunities to, you know, in whatever market that you're doing, whatever event that it is, connecting with that local market, looking at those local businesses, connecting with the leaders in the community, speaking to them, because people will get referred to you. People will just pick up and be like, I am really interested in this thing that you are doing. Please tell me more about it so that I can throw money at you. Again, just like being an earnest ambassador for what it is that you're doing, it's a lot easier to find people than you think.
And I also say there's also a world where you don't have a physical tournament. You can start running online tournaments and broadcast through Twitch like anytime. You can do that, and it's totally free. It's just your time, essentially. I think that, you know, a lot of organizers, they kind of make the mistake of trying to create a homestand experience where, oh yeah, we're gonna have 2,000 audience, and we need to have like 7 food trucks, and we're gonna have like 300 players, and it's gonna be this massive thing. It's gonna be awesome. It's really hard to run a community event like that, right? Like, unless you have a huge ecosystem of friends and volunteers and things like that. So it's good to just very properly scope. Start small. Start with just a few players. Start in your living room. Have something in your living room and just like start running it. A lot of like streamers and stuff are just putting green screens up on the back wall of their living room and casting from like a folding table in the back of the room. Like, it's wacky. Like, people are just doing fun stuff because they love it. It doesn't have to be the most polished, beautiful, lights up, crazy sound. Like, it doesn't have to be like that, you know?
Anyone else? Oh, we got one over here.
Am I on? Okay, sweet. Jordan Bramlett, Entertainment Business. Question for Erin. You are part of a global organization that's heavily invested in the Chinese market, especially with so many teams for Overwatch being Chinese teams. Can you talk about some of the struggles of dealing with a country and a government that isn't like ours? You know, it's a communist government, so obviously there's probably different challenges that you face, maybe on the local level or even maybe logistically. Could you speak to that?
I'm not exactly the best person to speak to that, but you know, I think that, you know, being, and you kind of mentioned it when you started, is a global audience, and I think that that's really the key thing to kind of keep in mind, is that every viewer, and we really are looking at the viewers, right? Like those are the people we really care about. So viewers and players, what is their experience like? How do we create an open ecosystem that everybody can kind of play in? There's a lot of technical limitations, actually. There's a lot of like broadcast limitations and things like that, working with other countries. So we try to do the best that we can to kind of overcome that together, working in partnerships. We have a great team in China that we work with, or with a NetEase group, and they're super smart, talented group, and we try to work through problems together. We try to come together to solve things. So I think that's kind of the best answer I can give you on that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's it's being globally minded, is thinking globally. It's trying to understand the needs and wants of everybody. It's not just what is in Southern California, or even what is just in the United States or North America, So yeah, it's been a learning experience for me, for sure. Learning global business. It's really interesting.
I think we had another question on this side over here.
It's on. Good. Hi, my name is Bob. Has there been a specific, and let's not talk coronavirus since it seems to be so common now, but some kind of specific barrier or obstacle that you faced when putting on an event, and how did you kind of overcome that, and what were the results of overcoming that specific challenge?
So there's always a bunch of speed bumps that you can run into from an event perspective. Like, if you're really lucky, you don't have to deal with venues. Venues have a lot of events that happen at them, and making sure that, anything from nailing down a date for an event in the future, getting the appropriate space that you need, or getting the number of ballrooms and breakout rooms that you need for the panels that you have. Really, it comes down to being flexible and having a team and having a mindset to find creative solutions to the speed bumps that you run into, because they're more numerous to count, and you're not going to know until you have a flat tire because you hit a speed bump going 150 miles an hour trying to get an event done.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Working through as many plan Bs as possible. Is your venue going to hold enough people? Are you going to hold too many people? Being able to be flexible and talking through that with everyone on your team, your production company, or your friends, or whoever. The size doesn't matter about the event, but always having a backup plan, and then a backup plan for that backup plan, and then a third one just in case. As proactive as you can.
Yeah, I'd say it's also understanding, what's essential, right? So it's like, let's think of a good example. If the merch booth, for example, something happens in delay, the shipping is all messed up, and the merch booth doesn't get there in time, that's a bummer, but it doesn't stop the show from going on, right? Versus the broadcast truck was delayed and you don't have a broadcast anymore. That's like a whole different thing. So you kind of create more contingency plans around the things that are essential, the show must go on kind of pieces, and the pieces that are like, man, I really wish we had those gift bags for all the players. Like, that would have been great. Well, we can ship them afterwards. It's gonna be a bummer, but we could do it. And so, you kind of prioritize the stuff that's like, holy cow, we need that broadcast truck.
So not letting one thing just ruin.
Yeah.
You got to be, again, flexible.
Canceling an event is very hard, and you want to avoid it at all costs. So where you can scale down or rescope as appropriate, that's not going to ruin the show and ruin the experience. Sometimes you got to do it.
And it's real easy to, once you've kind of like hit a snag, because a lot of times like most snags that you run into are new and you've never seen them before, and like the only reason you hit it is because you didn't expect it. It's really, really easy to be like, cool, that will literally never happen again.
Any other questions? Go. Back.
Actually, sorry, David. This is Tracy back here.
Oh, hi, Tracy.
I have a question from our online audience from YouTube. We have Sterling Bond, who is an alumni. He says, I sincerely want a career in esports casting. I've produced and run audio for DreamHack Dallas as a volunteer, and I'd love to do more, maybe even get a job. Is streaming audio engineer a viable career? Would trying to make sound and music for game studios better position me for esports?
I don't know if it's going to get you a career, but maybe. There's certainly a lot of music creation that is going on. We use, in our broadcast packages, we use a lot of effects from the game, a lot of the game sound and things like that. But I will tell you that a couple years ago, when we created our brand new Masters Tour and Grandmaster system for Hearthstone, again, absolutely true story. Hey, does anybody know a composer? I don't think so. And then we started asking around. We asked somebody on the StarCraft team, hey, do you guys know anybody who knows a composer? What do you guys use for your music? Oh, yeah, my brother is actually a composer. Like, you want to talk to him? And he totally got the contract. He totally wrote all of the competitive music for all of Hearthstone competitive now, and it plays on every single broadcast. He came to BlizzCon last year, and he got to see his music play in this massive crowd of humans. And he's just like, I can't believe this. This was just a fluke. It's because my brother was on the team. And so you seriously have you can't even imagine like where your next break is going to come from. They can come from very surprising places. But we absolutely get custom music created. It is certainly a thing. I don't know. Do you guys use custom stuff? Yes.
Yes.
Portfolios and reels are important. Do what you can as much as you can. Put it on the internet so people can find it. So the second someone's like, I'm looking for it, you've already put the link in and sent it to them so that you have it ready for them to see.
And have a portfolio that matches the style of esports you're seeing now. It's like, big rushing music. There's a lot of rock. There's a lot of like EDM stuff is like super popular right now. So, know the kind of stuff that we like to hire, that we like to buy for our sound.
Yeah. With these homestands, there's lots of talks of, music needs. So, and customizing it really goes with the experience we're trying to put on, what that theme might be, and then crafting visuals and audio around it. So there's definitely a use for it, in what I do. Yeah.
That's great. And your advice on making the music feel like what you're trying to sell it to actually works from a visual standpoint, resume standpoint, and everything you're trying to get.
Yeah, it's got to fit in the brand.
Right.
It's got to fit. It's got to have the same kind of feel as what you're going for in the game. Just a little more hyped up.
Right. I think we could have gone another hour, but they're telling me we're done. So, if everyone can thank Rob, Erin, and Alex for joining us. And thank you all and those online, and enjoy the rest of Hall of Fame week. Thank you.